The night was silent, yet heavy as if the air itself refused to breathe. A vast palace stood under the dim light of flickering torches, its walls whispering secrets that no one dared to repeat. Behind those cold stone walls, a queen sat in her chamber, alone and restless, her heart torn between duty and blood. Her name was Brunhilde, the formidable queen of Austrasia. A woman once celebrated for her beauty and cunning, now feared for her ruthless grasp on power. The story of Brunhilde is not a tale of a mother who lost control. It is the story of a mother who chose to sacrifice her own son in the name of ambition and survival. And it begins in a time when kingdoms were torn apart by betrayals, conspiracies, and endless wars. Imagine a candlelit chamber where the queen's advisors gather, whispering about treachery at court. Their faces pale, their voices hushed, because even words could cost a life. They spoke of rebellion, of betrayal, even within the royal family, and in those whispers, a chilling suggestion began to take shape. The queen's own son was accused of conspiring against her throne. Brunhilde had lived her life, surrounded by daggers, hidden in the shadows. She had seen her husband murdered in cold blood during a bitter war. She had been betrayed by allies who swore loyalty but crumbled in the heat of ambition. So when she heard whispers that her son, Theodoric, might betray her too, she felt not the love of a mother, but the suspicion of a ruler. Theodoric was young, brash, and ambitious. He had grown restless under his mother's dominance. Court chronicles tell us that he often quarreled with her and resented her iron grip on power. But was he truly a traitor, or simply a son trying to break free from his mother's? Shadow history gives us fragments, and fragments only chroniclers of the time were careful not to accuse the queen directly. Yet the records show that Theodoric was accused of treason and swiftly condemned. The sentence was unthinkable execution, ordered by none other than the queen, his mother. Pause for a moment and imagine the scene. A son standing before his mother's throne, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had faced enemy soldiers on the battlefield, but never imagined facing death at the hands of his own blood. The court was silent, breathless, as the queen's order echoed through the hall. No mercy, no hesitation, no trace of maternal sorrow. Why would a mother do this? Was it sheer lust for power? Was it fear that her son would overthrow her, or was it something darker, a reflection of a world where love was crushed beneath the weight of survival and ambition? Brunhilde was not the first ruler forced to choose between blood and crown, but what makes her story terrifying is the cold resolve with which she carried it out. She did not hide behind advisors. She did not weep in public. She declared her son guilty and demanded his execution. The records tell us Theodoric was dragged from the court. Some say he begged for his mother's mercy. Others claim he remained proud and defiant till the end. But all accounts agree on one thing: the queen's command was carried out without delay. The execution was brutal. No royal dignity, no quiet exile, no hidden assassination. It was public, deliberate, meant to send a message that no one, not even the queen's own son, could defy her. The crowd watched in horror as the young prince's life was snuffed out, and when the deed was done, all eyes turned to the queen, her face unreadable, her heart locked away from the grief that should have shattered her. This was not the end of Brunhilde's story, but only the beginning of her descent into darkness. With her son gone, she consolidated her grip on the throne. She crushed her rivals one by one, often with the same merciless hand she had used on her own blood. And yet the ghost of her son never truly left her court. Whispers followed her wherever she went, whispers of a queen who had crossed the final line of humanity. But here is where the story grows even darker, because hidden beneath the surface of this tragedy lies a truth that history often dares not tell. Some sources suggest that Brunhilde may have used her son's death not simply as a punishment, but as a weapon. By ordering his execution, she not only silenced a potential threat, but sent a chilling warning to every noble in her kingdom. Defy me, and you will meet the same fate, no matter who you are. The ripple effect was enormous. Nobles, who once plotted in secret, began to fear her allies, who dreamed of rebellion, kept their ambitions buried deep. The throne was safe for the moment, but at what cost? Story of Brunhilde is drenched in power games, bloodshed, and betrayals, but it is also the story of a mother who became a symbol of fear instead of love, a woman who chose to carve her legacy not through compassion, but through terror. Now, let us step deeper into the shadows of her reign, because after her son's death, the queen's hunger for power only grew sharper. She began weaving alliances. Through manipulation and marriages, she turned enemies into pawns and pawns into corpses, and as her empire grew stronger, so did the hatred against her. Yet even in her darkest triumphs, the memory of her son lingered. Could she truly silence the voice inside that whispered of guilt and regret? Or did she bury it so deep that it twisted her into something far more terrifying than a queen, something closer to a monster? What followed in the years ahead would shock even her most loyal supporters. Brunhilde's reign became a tale of endless bloodletting, of executions that spared no one. The same woman who had once wept for her murdered husband now seemed incapable of tears. The same mother who had once held her child now wielded the sword against him. And so we are left with a haunting question. What transforms a mother into an executioner? Is it the cruelty of the world around her? Is it the intoxication of absolute power? Or is it the slow erosion of love, replaced by fear, betrayal, and survival? This is not just a story of the past. It is a mirror of humanity itself. A reminder of how ambition can corrupt the purest bonds. A reminder of how fear can strip away compassion. A reminder that in the shadows of history, the line between victim and villain is often blurred, and as the queen's shadow grew darker, her fate was drawing closer. For history shows us that those who rule through terror do not escape terror themselves. Brunhilde would one day face a death so brutal, so humiliating that it shocked even her enemies. But before we reach that final chapter, we must walk through the labyrinth of her reign, step by step. The years after her son's execution were soaked in silence that felt heavier than any battlefield cry. The court never spoke of Theuderic again, not openly, not where ears could hear, but behind closed doors, among the servants in the kitchens inn. The whispers of guards his name lived on, the name of a prince cut down not by his enemies, but by his mother's decree. Brunhilde walked through the marble halls with a regal calm, yet behind her every step trailed fear. Her advisors obeyed, but their loyalty was fragile, built on survival rather than trust. They had seen her sacrifice her son. What hope did they have of mercy if they displeased her? And still she ruled with iron conviction, building alliances across fractured kingdoms, marrying her granddaughters to powerful lords, manipulating dynasties like pieces on a chessboard. It was an age where power was blood and blood was currency. Every decision was paid for with lives, and Brunhilde spent freely, but with each victory came enemies, more vicious than the last. The nobles whispered about her cruelty, about the unnatural way she clung to power far beyond what custom allowed a queen. The church too began to turn its gaze upon her. To the clergy, Brunhilde was not a guardian of the faith, but a dangerous woman who blurred the line between monarch and tyrant. Her willingness to spill royal blood, even her own sons, became proof of her godlessness. And yet she continued. She forged alliances with neighboring rulers, manipulating succession lines so that her bloodline remained in control. She ruled not one, but two kingdoms through sheer force of will. But the deeper her hands reached into the throne, the more hatred grew against her. Theuderic's ghost lingered in this hatred. For nobles could forgive wars, they could forgive heavy taxes, they could even forgive betrayal, but they could not forgive the violation of a sacred bond, a mother's betrayal of her child. To them, Brunhilde had crossed into the realm of the unholy still. She endured, but time is merciless even to queens. The woman once known for her beauty had grown old. Her enemies, younger, stronger, hungrier, began circling like wolves around a wounded prey. Among them was the ruthless nobleman Clotaire, son of her old rival Fredegund. He remembered well the stories of Brunhilde's cruelty. He knew that if he could destroy her, he would not only win power, but also erase the shadow of her reign forever. Stage was set for one of the most shocking downfalls in medieval history, and it began with betrayal from those Brunhilde thought would defend her in the year 613. After decades of holding kingdoms in her grasp, the queen's allies turned against her. Her army was abandoned, her counselors defected. Her people refused to stand by her side. All the fear she had sown over the years returned like a tide and swallowed her whole captured and dragged before her enemies. Brunhilde was no longer the towering figure who had ordered her son's execution. She was an old woman, weary and broken, yet still defiant. Her captors asked for confession, asked her to repent for her sins. But Brunhilde did not bow. She did not plead. Even as her enemies listed the crimes she had committed, the blood she had spilled, she stood with the same unyielding will that had defined her life. And then came the sentence. It would not be exile. It would not be poison in the night. It would be a death so savage that even the chroniclers of the time wrote of it with trembling. Hans, Brunhilde was bound to a wild horse, dragged mercilessly across the ground before a jeering crowd. Her body torn by rocks and earth, her royal dignity stripped away, her screams carried on the wind. It was a death meant not just to end her life, but to erase her from memory, to brand her as a monster for generations. But did it erase her? Or did it immortalize her in a way that her enemies never intended? Because Brunhilde's story is still told today, not only as the tale of a ruthless queen, but as a haunting question of what power does to the human soul. Was she truly a monster who murdered her own son out of ambition? Or was she a woman trapped in a brutal age where survival demanded inhuman choices? Her legacy forces us to ask ourselves, what would we sacrifice for power? Would we betray a friend for survival? Would we sacrifice family for a throne? And if so, at what point do we cease to be human? History is often written by victors. The same nobles who dragged Brunhilde to her death are the ones who shaped her image in chronicles, painting her as cruel beyond redemption. Perhaps they exaggerated, perhaps they hid their own sins beneath her shadow. But even if they twisted the story, the fact remains: a mother condemned her son, and the world has never forgotten. In her fall, we see not only the story of a queen, but the reflection of humanity's darkest truth, that love can be devoured by fear, that power can consume compassion, that history remembers cruelty far more than kindness. The silence after her execution was not peace, but a void. Her dynasty shattered, her kingdom torn. But the tale of Brunhilde traveled across centuries, carried by historians and poets as a warning about the cost of ambition, a warning about the fragility of trust, a warning that even the closest bonds can break under the weight of power. And now we stand centuries later, still drawn to her story, because it is not only the story of the past, but a mirror of the present. Even today, leaders sacrifice those closest to them for ambition. Even today, betrayal walks hand in hand with power. Even today, the ghost of Brunhilde asks us the same question. What are we willing to sacrifice in the name of control? Thank you for watching this story and walking through the shadows of history with me. If you felt the weight of Brunhilde's tale, I invite you to stay with us for more forgotten stories that still echo in our world today. Subscribe so you do not miss the next chapter of history's darkest secrets, told the way they were meant to be remembered.